Picture this: Paramount Global, a titan of American media, writing a check for $16 million, not to another Hollywood powerhouse or an up-and-coming streaming rival, but to end a fierce legal battle with a former president of the United States. This money is not destined for Donald Trump's personal bank account, but rather earmarked for his future presidential library. Yet, hidden behind this transaction is a high-stakes story about the collision of power, freedom of the press, and a merger worth billions of dollars that could reshape the entertainment industry. The repercussions of this decision may very well echo through every newsroom in America, raising the question, did Paramount just set a precedent that could alter the landscape of American journalism forever? To truly grasp the weight of this moment, we have to journey back through history. The relationship between the media and political figures in the United States has always been a blend of cooperation, rivalry, and tension. In the late 18th century, the fledgling nation saw the Alien and Sedition Acts under President John Adams, which sought to silence critics of the government. Newspapers were threatened, editors were jailed, and the concept of a free press came under direct assault. Yet, the ink of dissent could not be contained. Fast forward to the transformative 1960s, and the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in New York Times versus Sullivan. This case set a daunting standard for public officials hoping to sue journalists for defamation. The bar was raised so high, requiring proof of actual malice, that for generations, the First Amendment offered media outlets a robust shield against attempts at intimidation and censorship. This legal backbone enabled the press to investigate Watergate, challenge the Vietnam War narrative, and expose corporate and political scandals without fear of constant retribution. This deal promised to combine legendary assets, think the iconic Melrose Avenue studio, the Paramount Plus streaming platform, CBS, Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, and BET, into one formidable media force. But this grand vision ran into a formidable obstacle, a lawsuit filed by Donald Trump, who alleged that CBS had manipulated his interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris, with the intent to sway the presidential election. The lawsuit claimed that CBS's editing amounted to malicious, deceptive, and substantial news distortion, designed, in Trump's words, to confuse, deceive, and mislead the public. And, as the case moved forward, legal costs ballooned, over $5 million spent on attorney fees alone, with no end in sight. Sherry Redstone, the family's matriarch, faced mounting pressure. Paramount's parent company was saddled with more than $400 million in debt, and her own personal stake, valued at around $2.5 billion, hung in the balance. The only way to unlock the payday and stabilize the company's future was to smooth the path for Skydance's takeover. But fate threw another wrench into the works. The Federal Communications Commission, led by a Trump-appointed chairman, Brendan Carr, launched an inquiry into whether CBS's editing of the 60 Minutes interview constituted news distortion. In the world of American broadcasting, the FCC's approval is essential, not just a rubber stamp, but a gatekeeper role that can make or break multi-billion-dollar deals. Without the FCC's consent, Paramount could not transfer its more than 24 CBS station licenses to the new owners. The process dragged on, with the October deadline for the merger's completion looming ever closer. Every day of delay risked blowing up the entire transaction, leaving Paramount with a mountain of debt and the Redstones' fortune in jeopardy. Faced with this no-win scenario, Paramount made a fateful choice: buy peace, whatever the cost. The company agreed to pay $16 million, ostensibly for Trump's future presidential library, and to impose a new requirement on 60 Minutes. From now on, it must release interview transcripts with all eligible presidential candidates after the interviews air, though redactions are allowed for legal or national security reasons. The deal would theoretically end the legal battle, clear the path for the Skydance merger, and let the Redstones and their investors breathe a sigh of relief. Yet, this was far from a simple business negotiation. The settlement ignited a firestorm across the media landscape. First Amendment scholars and press freedom advocates sounded the alarm. Floyd Abrams, a renowned First Amendment attorney, declared, "This settlement sends a chilling message to journalists that powerful figures can use litigation to silence critical reporting." The nonprofit Freedom of the Press Foundation called the deal a direct threat to journalistic independence and even threatened to sue Paramount if it went ahead. Meanwhile, within the walls of CBS and Paramount, journalists and producers were furious, fearing that their editorial autonomy had been traded for short-term corporate gain. The reaction was not limited to journalists. Corporate insiders, private equity investors, and regulators watched with mounting anxiety. Would this deal set a precedent? Would other media giants follow suit, settling with politicians or business leaders to avoid legal headaches, no matter the cost to their reputation or principles? The prospect of a domino effect loomed large, especially as the industry braces for further consolidation. This isn't just about one lawsuit or one company. The implications ripple far beyond Paramount's boardroom. What happens when media conglomerates, desperate to secure billion-dollar deals, decide that it's easier and cheaper to settle with powerful politicians rather than defend their reporting in court? What does it mean for the future of press freedom, investigative journalism, and the public's right to know? Let's dig deeper into the potential consequences. One immediate risk is the chilling effect on investigative reporting. As Floyd Abrams warned, this settlement could empower other politicians and corporate actors to use lawsuits as a weapon, intimidating newsrooms, stifling critical stories, and eroding the watchdog role of the press. Imagine reporters, already under immense pressure from shrinking budgets and rising partisan attacks, now having to weigh the legal and financial risks of every tough interview or expose. News organizations might become more risk-averse, steering clear of controversial subjects or powerful subjects, especially when their parent companies are entangled in sensitive financial transactions or regulatory battles. This is not a theoretical concern. After Disney settled a high-profile lawsuit, ABC's This Week saw its audience shrink by 8%, as viewers expressed their frustration over what they perceived as a compromise of editorial integrity. The public is watching and losing trust. Once that trust is broken, it's incredibly hard to rebuild. But the story does not end with a single settlement or a dip in ratings. The Paramount-Skydance merger itself is now at a crossroads. The Federal Communications Commission's approval is still up in the air, and political scrutiny is intensifying. National security experts, such as Sander Gerber from the Center for American Rights, have raised serious concerns about Skydance's ties to Tencent, a Chinese tech giant with close links to the Beijing government. Tencent's stake in Skydance could, in theory, give it access to Paramount's vast content library, raising fears of censorship or the alteration of films and news for the Chinese market. In recent years, Hollywood studios have faced mounting criticism for editing or shelving content to appease Chinese authorities, and this deal could add fuel to that fire. If the FCC decides to dig deeper, the merger could face significant delays or even collapse by October of next year. Such a scenario would be catastrophic for Paramount. The company's debt load, more than $400 million, is already crippling, and the Redstone's financial future would be thrown into chaos. Edgar Bronfman, once considered a rival bidder, has dropped out, leaving Skydance as the only serious suitor. If this deal falls apart, the financial consequences could ripple through the entire media sector. Suppose the merger does go through. In that case, it could set off a wave of consolidation, as other media companies scramble to cut similar deals, trading away editorial independence in the pursuit of regulatory approval and corporate synergy. The $8 billion value of the Skydance-Paramount merger makes it one of the most significant entertainment transactions in recent memory. If regulators seem willing to overlook concerns as long as companies make strategic settlements, the diversity of voices in American journalism could shrink even further, concentrating power in ever fewer hands. There's also the long-term risk to the credibility of American media. The public's trust in news organizations is already fragile, battered by accusations of bias, fake news, and corporate interference. This settlement, by appearing to put business interests above editorial integrity, could deepen that skepticism. As Jonathan Turley, a respected legal scholar, put it, Paramount may have calculated this as a sound business decision, but it sets a troubling precedent for media companies facing legal pressure. Larry Sabato of the Center for Politics echoed this, saying, "The optics of this settlement are terrible. It reinforces the perception that political influence trumps journalistic integrity." The ripple effects could be profound. If newsrooms become more cautious, if investigative journalists are discouraged, if editorial decisions come to be seen as negotiable bargaining chips in corporate mergers, the entire fabric of American democracy could be weakened. A free and independent press is not just a constitutional ideal, it's a practical necessity for holding the powerful to account and keeping the public informed. Second, support independent and nonprofit journalism. Organizations like the Freedom of the Press Foundation are on the front lines, advocating for transparency, fighting legal battles, and defending the First Amendment. Subscribing to reputable publications, Donating to nonprofit newsrooms or simply sharing high-quality investigative reporting helps reinforce the pillars of a free press. Every reader, every viewer, every supporter makes a difference. If you work in media, law, or technology, this case is a wake-up call. The environment is becoming more litigious, more competitive, and more politically charged. Corporate leaders may be tempted to trade away hard-won freedoms for short-term financial relief or regulatory approval. As Bill Owens, a former executive producer of 60 Minutes, warned, the erosion of editorial independence is a grave threat to the future of broadcast journalism. And what about presidential libraries, the supposed beneficiary of Paramount's $16 million payment? These institutions, originally envisioned by Franklin D. Roosevelt as a way to preserve presidential records and promote public access, have become increasingly expensive to operate, with some costing more than $20 million a year. The financial burden has shifted toward private endowments, intensifying the pressure for big donations and raising new questions about transparency, influence, and the true purpose of these libraries. History offers both warnings and hope. In the past, attempts to muzzle the press have often backfired, galvanizing public support for transparency and reform. The Fairness Doctrine, once enforced by the FCC to mandate balanced coverage of controversial issues, was repealed in the 1980s, leading to a more polarized, and some would argue, less accountable, media environment. Today, as the boundaries of free speech and corporate power are tested once again, the lessons of the past remind us that vigilance, advocacy, and public engagement are the ultimate safeguards of press freedom. So, what can you do right now? Stay informed. Seek out diverse sources of news. Question narratives that seem too convenient or one-sided. Support journalists and organizations that prioritize integrity over expediency. If you have the means, contribute to nonprofit news and press freedom groups. If you have a platform, use your voice to demand transparency and accountability from both media companies and political leaders. And if you work in the media, remember that your work matters. Every story told with courage, every investigation pursued with integrity is a bulwark against the erosion of press freedom. The stakes are higher than ever, but so is the opportunity to make a difference. If you found this deep dive valuable, hit the like button, subscribe for more insights on global economics and technology, and join the conversation in the comments below. Do you believe settlements like this threaten media freedom, or are they just a smart business move in a cutthroat industry? Your perspective is vital, and as this story continues to unfold, we'll be here